Well, again, some of America's biggest and most profitable companies are announcing they're laying off thousands of employees. Is that starting to be felt here in Oklahoma? That is the topic of this week's in-depth discussion with moderator Susan Cadeau and her panel of guests.
Rich, this is an important topic, and we have a panel who can help us kind of do a little deep dive for all of Oklahoma. I'd like to introduce them to you now. We have Dr. Travis Roach, who is an associate professor and the chair of the economics department at the University of Central Oklahoma. We also have Trey Rahill, who is the CEO of the Oklahoma Employment Security Commission. And joining us via Zoom is David Crow, who is the Outreach and Information Officer for the Oklahoma Office of Workforce Development. Thank you all for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes.
Well, my first question is to you, Travis. I was going to call you Dr. Roach, but we're going to go with Travis because we're all friends here. The layoffs have been more noticeable of late in the tech industry. Does that affect Oklahoma? Are we not very tech heavy here?
We're not very tech heavy here, and it's good always to put some context with these numbers. Tech layoffs, yes, have been up, and we've been kicking the can down the road on this recession for a while now. So any kind of sign or news that we hear about that, I think we bristle and our hair stand up, kind of worried about it. But we got to remember this is a small portion of all jobs in tech, and then sure, layoffs are up, but we're not talking about the other side of the coin where many of these folks are able to go and find a new job pretty readily after that.
We do have, do we have jobs available that are not being filled currently in Oklahoma?
Absolutely. You've probably heard the adage that nobody wants to work anymore, but we're also at an all-time low unemployment rate. So what we have is more job openings than job applicants, which is a sign of a very, very healthy job market.
Still, some people do lose their jobs. And David, I want to come to you. What does Oklahoma Works do to help those who are recently out of work?
Well, we have workforce centers, Oklahoma Works American Job Centers all over the state of Oklahoma. We have more than 25 of them. And those centers are open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And they're there to help people polish their resumes, work on interview skills, maybe see if they qualify for training as well. So the state really makes an effort to make sure that Oklahomans, if they do find themselves without work, there are opportunities out there for them to reconnect in the workforce and find other careers. We are hiring like crazy right now across the state.
All right, Trey, I want to come to you. When someone's laid off, what do they do? What's the steps they take?
So as Dr. Roach mentioned, layoffs are an ever-present thing. So we see the job market kind of ebb and flow. There's layoffs or discharges from jobs every month. Depending on the industry, there's usually jobs readily available for people to transition into, and our workforce centers, as David mentioned, are out there to aid them in that process. So essentially, they can work directly with recruitment firms. They could work with their employers. A lot of times, layoffs are a coordinated effort between the employers and the folks being laid off. But our American Job Centers have a ton of resources, and they work closely with employers within industry so that they can help people kind of navigate that time and not find themselves unemployed for any amount of time.
So how do they find out about that? I mean, do people know that there are resources that they can access?
Well, hopefully they watch OETA and they can get information from local news channels like this. But we put out quite a few resources online and into the public media. We also have a lot of outreach efforts. David mentioned some of those from the workforce development side, but the local offices, there are 28 across the state, and they work very closely with a local workforce board that brings together, the Chamber of Commerce and other players in that area to drive kind of a local labor market. And so there's a lot of resource sharing and resources made available online or in the offices themselves. And we've actually just recently piloted programs in 2 of our communities where our staff is going into employer spaces and they're setting up shop there to partner more closely with them, go into libraries, go into employers.
Well, and if you know a company knows they're going to be doing layoffs, can they access for help?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we love hearing from employers. That's our ability to help Oklahomans navigate challenging times, any type of challenge in the labor market. We really hope that employers will engage us, and we've got lots of resources that we share with them and kind of help them through it. The fact of the matter is, we don't see the layoffs in Oklahoma that we see in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
We're always below the national average for unemployment rates, and I think that's because our employers here are more reluctant than you see probably on the coasts to hire just in droves, hire lots of people when markets spike. So we see a little bit more of a conservative approach. So I think employers in our state do a little bit of better job, kind of planning for that on the front end, so it doesn't hit as hard as it does in some areas.
Yeah, Travis, I wanted to talk to you about that. Are we insulated from what's going on nationally? I have seen gas prices going up a little bit in Oklahoma, and the eggs are up, but not what I'm seeing, nationwide. Why are we insulated?
We are a little insulated just because, like you said, we're not quite as responsive, or we're not so heavy into one single sector. For instance, I think of the East Coast and I think of the finance sector really governing a lot of the jobs and associated jobs out here. In Oklahoma, we do have a heavy dose of energy employment. We have a new and growing film industry. We also have plenty of rural jobs, and we have manufacturing. We're a little more diversified, I guess, than the average state. What helps us too is we have folks like who you have on the program today who are doing their jobs of helping with unemployment insurance and moving these federal dollars and monies and allocations to help stabilize our economy in these times that are a little rougher.
So when you're talking to your students and all of the economic news right now, what are you telling them about what's going on nationally?
Oh, that it's always a great time to be an economics major, that when inflation's up, you're asked about how to bring it back down. When the worry about unemployment is up, you're asked about how to keep that. One thing that's been interesting lately is talking about how politics gets involved with some of these conversations. And you mentioned eggs, for instance. To me, this is a classic free market economy issue of prices going up and down. We have an avian flu, we have costs of chicken feed going up, so that causes egg prices to go up. That is free market economics. The idea that someone is turning the levers behind the scenes to make that happen, and it has to do with the letter that's next to their name when they run for president or whatever, that just does not exist. And so that gets fun, but then also bringing into the fact that we have a lot of great economic policy on the books. So I would call unemployment insurance, we know that as an economic stabilizer. So it's there already. It's a policy that's been passed to help in times when maybe there's some clouds on the horizon. And that's great because, we just saw a speaker vote that took 15 votes in a couple different days. Can you imagine if they had to pass new unemployment benefits anytime we might be going into a recession? Nothing would ever get done. And so having some of these good economic stabilizers built into our policy network is great for the economy.
Okay, so it's a good place to be unemployed if that happens. Now, I want to go to David really quick. If the worst happens, David, and an employer knows that they need to do some layoffs, what are preemptive measures that both the employer and the employee can take?
Well, really, at the end of the day, it's all about that open communication. We want to see employers, if they do feel like they're going to experience a layoff, if they need to file a warn notice, if they have an exceptionally large layoff, the sooner they can do that, the better. That way we can kind of triage the situation. We can send in have a rapid response meeting, which those get talked about a lot when there are mass layoffs. And that's basically a workshop where the employees that are affected by the layoff are able to see what's out there. They're able to see what jobs are available, ways that they can maybe brush up on their skills if they're looking at changing industries. So it's really about communication. And it's about having that open dialogue that when there are going to be layoffs, when there are going to be challenges in the economy, just talking about it, because there's so many resources out there with the state of Oklahoma throughout our entire workforce investment system that are available to help. It's so important, again, to have that open communication.
So, David, you and I were talking earlier, and you've been where you are for just a few minutes, I think, a few years, more like.
Yes.
When's the last big layoff you saw in Oklahoma?
Goodness, there were a lot whenever COVID-19 started in March of 2020. We had some pretty rough months there when the pandemic got underway. Prior to that, we had some large layoffs in the oil and gas industry in late 2019 that got a lot of people's attention. So, we've been on just enormous smooth sailing for the last couple of years. Like we've talked about, we have more companies looking to hire than there are people out there. And I mean, it's a problem to have, but it's a good problem to have. So, we've seen over the years at times when it's the reverse of that. So, right now it's a different economic kind of setup than what we've had historically. So, we're learning to kind of do the best with it and see what we can do to help folks.
All right.
Susan,
Yes.
I'll just add something to that. I think we see trends across industry that explain some of kind of what we're noticing with layoffs, but we see thousands and thousands of discharges monthly. Some of those are cyclical in nature. They're more of a seasonal kind of trend, and that's what we're seeing right now. So I think when we're talking about any layoff news here in Oklahoma presently, it's important to note kind of where we are in context. Looking back and averaging the job market trends over the last several years, the change from December to January, you usually see job market cooling from a lot of those seasonal employers starting to let those staff go. Those are usually on permanent hires on temporary hires instead of permanent anyways. So
Sure.
We're actually seeing that cooling from in the last few weeks, those numbers uptick, which we would expect, and they're actually within range of what we've seen in the last couple of years. So I just want to make sure we contextualize that some so it doesn't seem like the sky is falling. I think that it's pretty normalized in what we're noticing right now.
So like you say, it's cyclical. So I'm going to ask all of you, and Doctor, we will let you answer first. Do you walk around saying, when's the other shoe going to drop? Things are too good right now. Or is that just what Oklahoma is?
I think maybe it's a philosophy thing. I don't think that's a great way to live your life, wondering if the next, foot you take, step forward, is going to fall off a stair. I think the first time I was asked about, are we in a recession in the news, was this June or July? And honestly, the question took me off guard, kind of like, wait, no, why would you think that? So I mentioned we keep kicking the can down the road on this recession. It's been a worry, but there's no economic data that would support that we should be. I think the economic concern is that the Federal Reserve is tightening interest rates to bring down inflation. That's their main policy lever. And I think there's some dark memories from the early 80s with Paul Volcker when he was the Federal Reserve Chair. He did the same, and he did cause unemployment to go up. And I'm not trying to make light of any unemployment going up being a comfortable thing. But so far, the data is reading as the soft landing, that we are able to reduce inflation because a lot of it had to do just with backlogs and supply chains and COVID-19 and less to do with too much money supply in the system.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing this dark cloud of recession that everyone's talked about for a while, but it just really hasn't shown up.
Well, there was something I did want to ask you. In the medical industry, are we seeing some layoffs or people losing their jobs there in Oklahoma?
We certainly are. There were some that made the news just recently. And part of this is, again, just a timing mismatch. We have, some hospitals that are stuck on older pricing contracts that they need to bring up to date. And we need to remember that, a hospital needs to remain solvent. The counterfactual of them running at a deficit for too long is that they cease to exist.
Right.
And so they cannot allow that to happen. We can't allow them to let that happen. And so there will be some self-governance and some they'll probably call it right-sizing, but you will see layoffs in sectors that help keep a company afloat.
I'd like to make a comment on that just briefly.
Sure.
The healthcare industry has been stretched and tested and tried in ways throughout the last 2 years that most industries haven't.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to run healthcare operations when the supply of staff is what it has been. So, for instance, unemployment being low is a good thing, right? But it also makes it very difficult to find people with specialized skills for jobs because they can go out and make more money in a number of different arrangements. So nursing is a job that certainly saw that, peak during the pandemic.
Yes.
They were put in very challenging positions. Their pay was going up. The supply, it was this typical supply and demand equation. So I think healthcare providers doing everything they can to staff up to take care of what they were strapped with is a challenging thing to navigate, when you have no precedent set. And I think we saw that sector of our state grow by 6,600 jobs over the last year. So you see some of this right sizing or leveling off, and I mean, they're taking every chance I think they can to put themselves on solid ground to take care of Oklahomans. and there's no roadmap for the unprecedented. So I think
Sprinkle in some burnout.
Yeah,
on top of
I
that.
think it's right that
Right.
certain industries feel the burn a little bit more because when people are in short supply, it can get harder to place and staff up appropriately.
Well, I'm going to wrap up with David Crow. I'm going to let you have the final word on all you've been listening to here. Do you think another shoe is going to drop, or are we insulated?
So far, everything we've seen, as everyone has mentioned on this panel, we're doing great. Our economy's growing in this state. Unemployment is at or near record lows. It's good. We feel comfortable with where we are. So my advice to people is, if they do happen to wind up in a situation where they are unemployed, please reach out to your local workforce center, your local Oklahoma Works American Job Center. We have such great staff at those locations. They are happy to help. All of us could probably use our interview skills, some brushing up on. Our resumes could always have another set of eyes to review them. So if people do find themselves in those situations, please find those job centers out there. We have a complete list of them on our website, oklahomaworks.gov. And I would just encourage Oklahomans, if you are looking at wanting to increase your training, you're wanting to increase your skill set, please go to those centers. Please visit with that staff, and they can work wonders. We see it every day in our workforce centers, the amount of good things that are happening in terms of people finding career opportunities and other great things that they didn't know were possible.
Well, David, we love to wrap it up on a positive note and with solutions. I'd like to thank you and thank all of you for your time with us and all of the insight. I know it's going to be put to good use.
Thank you for having us and for focusing on such an important topic today.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.